Welcome back into Occupy Democrats. And Trump got the nickname Taco because he pushes all these things like tariffs and then pulls back on them when they don't work out on the international stage. And in this breaking story, that is exactly the issue with the way he believes he can run a business in New York with a board the same way he runs the country and foreign policy. And this is why, if like you want to see Trump out, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to show the story to you in just a few seconds because you won't believe the thing that has just happened regarding the rest of the planet. Oh, I don't know, our allies in Europe and how they feel about Trump, Ukraine, and Putin and what's going on. It is unbelievable because Trump, we like to say, oh, he's performative, he's transactional. That's really cute. But when it comes to foreign policy, that just makes him idiotic. Remember when he did this with Greenland?
Comments made by President Trump saying we will get the island. They pushing back the prime minister saying the United States will not get this. A post from the Chicago Tribune saying President Trump says the United States will, quote, get Greenland. Let me be clear. The United States will not get it. We do not belong to anyone else. We decide our own future. This from Greenland's prime minister.
Oh, that wasn't all.
Status quo is not an option.
After weeks of protest and criticism of President Trump's push for the U.S. to acquire Greenland,
for the United States to have a much stronger military presence in Greenland. If that is what you wish, then let us discuss it.
And you notice how it hasn't worked out since then?
But in both Greenland and Denmark, sentiment is turning against the U.S. And Greenland's new prime minister issued a blunt response to President Trump after he refused to rule out the use of military force, saying, quote, we do not belong to anyone else.
And then he makes this comment about Gaza and the land there. This.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate.
He just called an entire group of people's homeland a piece of real estate. This is how Europe is feeling about this BS Russia plan and Ukraine. When people start compiling plans and making foreign policy transactional, you get this.
People are furious here. There are really some outrageous demands here, especially this idea that the EU would have to use all of its frozen Russian assets, take on the legal liability for seizing them, and pay an additional 100 billion euros to the U.S. in order to manage Ukraine's reconstruction, and then the U.S. would benefit from that financially. It's shocked a lot of people here, and really people have been in kind of denial, I would say, here over the past months, taking some of Trump's public comments that seem to start to be frustrated with Vladimir Putin and Russia. You kept hearing in this town, Trump has softened on Ukraine. He's now anti-Russia. He's back on our side. Well, today really shows that that type of thinking was frankly delusional, as one EU official just told me earlier.
And in this breaking story, what Trump has done, or more notably his State Department, Marco Rubio, or more notably, no, none of them, Putin himself has done, has created this kind of acrimony from the European Union. The rest of the world that's supposed to be our friends. Check this story out.
EU rules out restrictions on Ukraine's army in rebuke to Trump plan, allowing Russia to change borders by force or letting Moscow veto Kiev's future membership in the EU are red lines, Brussels warns. A U.S. framework aimed at ending the war in Ukraine would leave the country more vulnerable to Russian aggression in the long term if it imposes limits on Kiev's armed forces, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned on Sunday. In a statement following talks on the sidelines of a G20 summit of major economies in South Africa, von der Leyen laid out a series of red lines in response to proposals being put forward by President Donald Trump's White House. The American blueprint suggests Ukraine should make territorial concessions to Moscow, halve the size of its military, and give Washington a 50% cut on profits from reconstruction. Any credible and sustainable peace plan should first and foremost stop the killing and end the war, while not sowing the seeds for a future conflict, von der Leyen said in the statement. According to the Commission President, the EU has three key criteria for any peace deal. First, borders cannot be changed by force. Second, as a sovereign nation, there cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave the country vulnerable to future attack and thereby also undermining European security, she said. Third, the centrality of the European Union in securing peace for Ukraine must be fully reflected, said von der Leyen. Ukraine must have the freedom and sovereign right to choose its own destiny. They have chosen a European destiny. Allies have held crisis talks during the summit in South Africa, and EU leaders are due to hold further discussions on Monday during a joint visit to Angola. European Council President Antonio Costa has welcomed U.S. efforts to end the war, but warned the current proposal is merely a basis which will require additional work. EU officials are in Geneva on Sunday for U.S. brokered talks on ending the conflict, where they are hoping to convince American envoys to reflect European concerns in the negotiations. Capitals have reiterated that no peace agreement can be done without direct input from Ukraine. European governments and Ukraine say they were effectively cut out of the development of the 28-point plan, which critics say rewards Russian aggression and would leave the door open to future invasions. Trump, meanwhile, appears to have backed away from a Thursday deadline for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to accept the terms of the U.S. proposal, saying the deal is not my final offer.
This isn't just performative or transactional or silly or dumb or moronic. This is a level of cognitive dissonance when it comes to foreign policy that is going to get us in more trouble than we can possibly imagine. And Donald Trump does not care. You just saw this with the tariffs. And what was China's response? They didn't buy one soybean for 6 months. That's what they did. And yet Trump continues to believe that he can tell people or have Vladimir Putin tell him what we're going to do, and the rest of the planet is just going to accept it because we're the United States of America and we might bomb your fishing boat if we think you're a bad person. It is unbelievable, which is why we have got to get him out. He has got to go. You guys like and share the video and stay frosty.